to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you hit subscribe. I'm your fun-loving furniture refinishing best friend and business coach, helping you learn how to refinish furniture and create a business doing what you love. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down how I created this amazing coffee table step by step, so come on the journey with me. Yes, you, come with me and let's watch how I make over this coffee table. Let's take a quick look at how it looked before. Yes, I know there's nothing wrong with it, but my client still wanted to give it a makeover, so that's what I'm going to do. I grabbed out my belt sander and I started to rip off the original varnish off the top of this piece. I used the belt sander just because it's so much quicker than using the orbital sander. Here you'll see from slightly different angle, I'm using the belt sander and I'm just going to hold the belt sander in place as I'm using that to rip the varnish off, making sure I hold it still and I have a lot of pressure in that belt sander so that it doesn't run away from me. Many different ways that you can take the varnish off the top of this piece. You can use a carbide scraper first to get some of that top layer off. You can use the belt sander like I am. You can just use an orbital sander. You could use a paint stripper, but it's up to you which one is going to work best for you. Just remove that original varnish and get back to the raw original timber. I actually tend to use multiple different sanders when I'm doing most of my pieces. Now I have out my orbital sander and I am just giving it a bit of a tidy up. When I use the belt sander, I don't use it too much. I just use it to take the top layer off and then grab out the orbital sander. When I'm sanding, I usually work my way up the grits. I start with an 80 grit, move on to a 120 grit, and then smooth out with a 240 grit before I move on to any further steps. So I just work my way through all of the grits because that's going to give me the nicest, smoothest possible timber before I then move on to painting or staining. I only recently got this particular vacuum attachment that I've got attached here to this sander. I had a little bit of an issue attaching it to my belt sander because I didn't have the right attachment to connect it to the belt sander. It just had a wider fitting, but this particular sander fit well with the vacuum attachment, and so I've got that attached there to collect all of that sawdust that is lifted as I'm doing my sanding. You can just use a bag attachment or a vacuum attachment, whatever you want to use, and I actually got away with not using any kind of sanding attachment for quite some time. So it's really up to you as to whether you just want to sweep up all your sawdust, as long as you're wearing a dust mask when you are doing your sanding so that you don't get any of those dust particles into your lungs. Now I've grabbed my orbital sander and I'm going to sand the edges of the tabletop as well. I really wanted to have an overall cohesive appearance with the timber that almost wrapped around the table and the coffee table. So I'm using my sander to rip off the top layer of stain along this edge line as well. You can do this by hand, you can do it with your sander. You'll probably need to go over it a couple of different times from different angles to be able to really get that nice smooth appearance and remove all the original varnish, but it's up to you as to how you want to do this. You could even just paint that edge and have masking tape along the top if you really didn't want to sand the edge. The slowest bit is to sand this edge, so it was probably the most time-consuming component of sanding. I swapped again a bit like a hot potato, but I've got my battery orbital now because it's just easier to tip on its side. It's really lightweight and I can get up underneath this timber edge to create a really nice smooth line. Once I've got the top totally stripped bare, I then need to scuff sand the entire piece so that it's ready to go for painting. It can be quite difficult when you've got lots of little grooves and edges that you need to get into. I've just got a piece of hand sandpaper that I'm using just to scuff sand these legs and these feet. I actually often find it easier to scuff sand with just a piece of sandpaper in my hand than it is with my orbital sander, especially if I have lots of edges and hard to reach areas. If you've got an orbital sander, it can be really difficult to get into all of those little grooves, and I want to make sure that my paint is going to stick really well to the piece, and I need to get this scuffed up appropriately and then apply my primer. So many people think that scuff sanding is not that important, and I mean, there probably is paints out there where you don't have to scuff sand your piece. It is time consuming, and I understand from your perspective that it might be a little bit annoying to have to go through and scuff sand the entire piece, but every piece that I have scuff sanded and I have then applied the right primer, I've had such an amazing durable finish, and I believe it is 100% worth your time and effort to make sure that you're going to have a really solid product at the end of the day. Why take all the time to go through the stages of refinishing your furniture if you're not going to do it properly and then end up having all your paint scratch off? I had to remove the handles. I could have done this with a drill, but really for the sake of 3 screws, I thought it was just as easy to get my screwdriver out and remove those original handles. Plus, some people don't have access to a drill, so just grab a screwdriver, unscrew the handles and remove those so that you can then scuff sand the front of the drawers. My client for this particular piece wants to keep the original hardware, so I'm just going to put these aside and then reapply them at the end. I do the exact same process to scuff sand the front of my drawers, only for this piece, I have got a hard card inside my sandpaper. You'll be able to see, you could use a little flybys card or even just a hard piece of cardboard and put it in between your sandpaper. So you've got a hard edge that you can really push into those grooves in between those spaces. Next up, I'm going to do a really deep clean with my degreaser on my piece. You're either a lover of cleaning or a hater of cleaning, but I actually love to clean. I just hate how long it takes me, and it is really time consuming to clean your piece. Sometimes I even get a little bit annoyed myself when I'm doing the cleaning. I do understand how important it is though, so I persist. Now it's time to unleash the power of the brush and get painting. This is my favorite bit. The primer is almost like a superhero. When you apply a really good primer onto your piece, it's like laying the foundations to getting everything right. Make sure when you're applying the primer, you get into all the little nooks and crannies. You really just want to get an even coat of primer over the entire piece. This is because this is our base that we're going to use to have our paint stick to. And it doesn't necessarily matter too much if you have brush strokes in this. I'm using Zinsser Bin Primer, and this primer is especially bad for having a lot of brush strokes and also sometimes being difficult to apply. If this is the first time you've used Zinsser Bin Primer, it can feel really quite weird to apply and has almost a very sticky feeling. So if you're new to applying a shellac primer, don't worry if it doesn't have good coverage and it looks very patchy. That's just how it's going to be. While you're applying your primer, you just want to crank some good tunes and really embrace the moment. Try and find that sense of calm and serenity in what it is that you're doing and enjoy the experience. And she passed the scratch test, as strong as a rock. If you don't know what a scratch test is, let me know in the comments and I'll do a separate video for you. Now to apply the paint, I chose to use a beautiful colour called Myrtle from Pureco. It's a stunning country green. And this piece is actually a commission piece that I'm doing to match the TV unit I did with the picture frame doors. It's the same client's piece, and these two pieces are going to be going together in her living room. If you haven't seen that video, you can go back and check out my other videos. For this piece, I decided to apply all of the paint just with a paintbrush. I could have used a roller for certain sections, but because it's got so many fiddly little edges, I just decided it would be as quick to just apply all of the paint with my paintbrush. I actually had to apply 3 coats of paint to this piece. I applied a second coat while I had the piece upside down, and then I decided I was going to tip the piece upright, and I realized there was a few little nooks and crannies that I needed to apply a 3rd coat of paint to. For me, painting furniture has always been something that I found very relaxing. I just love the actual process of applying and painting the furniture, and then I love the end result. Once all my painting was finished, I then needed to go along and sand this edge. Because I decided not to use masking tape for this piece, as I just decided it was as easy to resand the edge once I had painted, I then needed to go along and get a nice smooth edge so that when I applied my stain and my top coat, you could see that beautiful timber edging. If you love my style and how I refinish furniture, I'd love to give you the opportunity to come and join me inside my furniture painting membership. The first 5 modules are to teach you how to refinish furniture, and then the last module is where I give you step-by-step lessons each month and amazing masterclasses with new products and challenges that you can participate in. If you're interested, check out the information in the description. Here I'm applying the stain to the top of the piece. I'm using a stain called Sepia, which has got quite a bit of yellow undertones, and it's a really country vibe. It's a stain and glaze in one. However, the glaze is very light. So I apply the stain and then I wipe back the excess with a microfiber cloth. I do this in little sections over the entire piece to make sure I get a really even consistency of the stain. You'll be able to see here in this close-up me applying the stain. I'm using a paintbrush just to paint on the stain, and then as I said, once I've applied the stain to the entire bit of timber that I'm applying it to, I grab out the microfiber cloth and wipe off the excess. Check out how amazing that timber grain is. You can see there the deep richness in the timber. It's just beautiful. Once I think I've finished painting, I do like to go back over the entire piece and just touch up any areas where I can see little brush strokes, or I might be able to see through the paint just to make sure it's perfect. Because this is the coffee table and it's going to be a really hard wearing area, I wanted to put an extra top coat over the top so that it was really easy to wipe clean if you spill something on it, and so that needed to be an oil-based top coat. I'm applying the oil-based top coat here with a paintbrush, and I'm going to apply 2 coats of this, making sure I give it a really good amount of time to dry in between. Oil-based paint takes a lot longer to dry, so I give it a good 6 hours, if not overnight, to dry before I then move on to the finishing touches. So are you feeling inspired yet? Ready to tackle a project in your own home? I think you might be. If you weren't, now you are. Check out how amazing it looks. It's got a beautiful, nice sheen on the top. The green is just stunning and it works so well together. Refinishing furniture, honestly, there's endless possibilities about what you can create, and the world is your oyster. I want you to be inspired and go and have a go at a DIY project.